Introduce myself first. So, hello again. I'm user Chineb. I usually go by Chinto. But yeah, I've been involved since about 2007 on the Mongolian, well, on Wikipedia in general. So that's almost half a lifetime ago for me. I'm currently and I'm still an admin on the Mongolian Wikipedia, and I've been an admin on there for a while. As we all know, we all have active and less active eras, I suppose, and I've been more active since about 2021 for a variety of reasons. But yeah, between I think 2010 and 2021, I would have been more just uploading images and doing things on the English Wikipedia side. But yeah, so this is me. And aside from Wikipedia, I have a day job as a software engineer. And while, yes, Wikimedia Australia is hosting me, thank you. All opinions here are my own. So if I say anything controversial, it's on me. Um, so I thought I would talk quickly about sort of why I contribute, and just like how this has been interesting or good for me first. So how I contribute. So on the English side, it's mostly creating and editing articles, and mostly it's stuff to do with Mongolia, Mongolian culture, etc. I am a programmer, but I believe that the most effective way for me to sort of contribute is doing this sort of stuff, which you don't really get a lot of contributors for. I upload images on Commons. So these are photos that I've taken, photos that my family has taken, friends have taken. These are all with permission, etc. And also just free media that's available on the internet. I'll go through this at the end, but there's a ton of stuff that's already available that's fully free that you can just clean up and just upload. And it would help a lot of articles and, I think engagement as well. So that's one thing that I like to do. And on the Mongolian Wikipedia side, I do quite a few things. Recently I've been doing everything except creating articles. So I tried to work more on the sort of infrastructure side, which is like, making the front page a bit better, helping out with templates and modules, adding interwikis, adding categories, just thinking about the categories, just doing the facilitation for a lot of things, etc. So this is what I mostly do on the Mongolian Wikipedia side. And and why I do it, it's a variety of reasons. Learning is great. Um, when I started back in 2007, I would have basically just been reading a lot of stuff, and we had dial-up at the time. So what I do is just turn on dial-up, click a bunch of articles on Wikipedia, and then turn off the dial-up, and then you could read it, go back, read it without actually using the internet for that. So that's always been sort of like a hobby for me, and it's great to do that. It's also rewarding giving back to the community. So the reason I say this is because I kind of have Wikipedia to thank for my career in that I had to pick up rudimentary programming concepts, etc., to contribute back in the day. I think the bar for entry was a bit higher. So just continuing doing that and just giving back to the community, I think it's just a nice thing to do, and it also helps me think about different technologies and stuff. So, for example, in the last year, I learned Lua, a new programming language, because I needed it for Wikipedia. And finally, I think it's just really fascinating to have to see your contributions out in the real world. So, Wikipedia obviously is, it's on the internet, but you can see your images and texts and just even random facts being parroted by random people that ultimately come from yours and like other people like you. So I think it's really interesting. I thought I'd just really quickly go through three examples that I have um, here. Um, yeah, I'll do this one later. But so this is an image I took, I think back in like 2008 or something. And this is just the picture of the Genghis Khan equestrian statue. A few years later, I was in a random bookstore in Mongolia, and they'd actually used that as the cover, which is, I think, which is, I think, really interesting. And I didn't have enough money to buy the book at the time, but I really wish I did. And as an aside, this image was actually deleted off of Commons for quite a while because of freedom of panorama rules, but it has been reinstated in the past year, so woohoo, very nice. Um, Another example is this one, which was used as the sort of image for this event. So again, a random picture I took back in 2014, and this has been used by the Amsterdam University Press to talk about their books about Northeast Asian studies. So yeah, it's just random things that pop up are really fun. Another one here is, so this is something that I will go through when I talk about the Mongolian language and challenges we face. But this is the sort of government issued dictionary that's supposed to be used everywhere for Mongolian. And they have a page on, the correct way to spell all the names of the provinces, cities, etc., Mongolia. And this image is actually one that I created when I was a teenager, and I did it using Microsoft Paint. It was so back, such an old image that if you go onto Commons, I think it was copied from NWiki, so the attribution was wrong. That's why I couldn't find myself. I think they missed an N in the Chineb. But yeah, so like it's very interesting to just like see these things in the real world, and this is why I contribute, and this is where I get the sort of, I guess, dopamine hit from. So, if we go to part one, I thought I'd talk about a bit of the context behind Mongolia and what is admittedly a pretty obscure country. So, um, these are a few pictures that I thought could maybe tell a story about what Mongolia is, and just give just a bit of an overview of the country. So. Mongolia is admittedly quite obscure. It's fairly unique in that it has a very big history behind it, but the modern sort of reality is quite different from that and what people think. So if you look at, for example, the images here, you have what the countryside looks like on a tourist brochure. So, horses, grasslands, etc. You still have people living in yurts. So in Mongolia, we call them gers. So these like sort of tent-like structures here. But the reality is that Mongolia has become very urban recently, and people who used to live nomadic lifestyle in the countryside have moved en masse into the city, and that's why there's a Prius there. Because Ulaanbaatar, the capital of Mongolia, I believe, has the highest density of Priuses in the world, or something like that. The reasons are just tax breaks and cheap imports, but basically people have swapped over their horses for Priuses in the city. The city currently has a infrastructure problem in that there is not enough of it. So while people do live in apartments, a lot of the cities still live in these sort of slum areas where they've just propped up their gears. And what this causes is pollution. So as an aside, I wasn't able to find a free image of Ulaanbaatar smoke. So if anyone does visit in winter, that's one thing you could do. But it gets very bad, as you can see here. And this is because in the city, people in the slum areas would only burn just raw coal and other things. So you get this smoke. And the other thing is because the city lies in a valley, um, the smoke all gets trapped. This is a very bad thing, and Mongolia has its issues, but I also will say that there's not enough sort of information about this freely available. There is no article on pollution in Mongolia or air pollution in Mongolia. There are sub-articles and like redirects, but if anyone is interested in sort of this, that's also something that you can contribute to. So, so that's Mongolia. What about the land? So Mongolia is located in Asia, obviously. Its only two neighbors are Russia and China, which makes it an interesting place geographically. And when it comes to size, it's about the size, it's about in between the Northern Territory and Queensland, so a bit smaller than Queensland, bit well, bigger than the Northern Territory. But yeah, this is its size. You might look at a map and see that there's a bit of a border with Kazakhstan on the east side, but in fact, there's a 40-kilometer gap there. So it's literally just Russia and China. So that's where Mongolia is located physically. So what about the people? It's a big country. I believe it's 16th in the world, but population-wise, it's tiny. It's actually smaller than where I live right now, which is Melbourne. So this image on the left is basically, Melbourne divided into, I think, what is it called? Like statistical areas. Yeah. So if you look at the shaded bits here, so both dark blue and light blue, the everyone who lives in the light blue area, that's basically, sorry, in the whole blue area, that's the whole of Mongolia. If you want to think about the capital, it's just the dark blue area here. So the whole population of the city is about the size of like inner city Melbourne. Another way to think about it is the whole population of Ulaanbaatar is about the same size of Adelaide, um, as an example. So it's a very big country and a very sparsely populated country. In fact, it is the least densely populated country in the world. And it's just two places, I think, below Australia. So it's Mongolia, Namibia, and Australia. And if you look at the population cartogram here, yeah, as mentioned before, half the population lives in just one city, and basically everything happens there. So you can almost think of it as a city state with a massive land area. And then if we think about the culture, this is, I think, where Mongolia is very sort of unique. When you look at that map, you can sort of divide Asia into multiple parts and think about the different countries in different parts as well. So Mongolia is East Asian. I mean, we look vaguely East Asian. It's also treated as being Central Asian because of the whole like nomadic world. There's also Northeast Asia. There's North Central Asia, which is what Britannica uses. And the Australian standard classification uses the unfortunate term Chinese Asia, includes Mongolia. But yeah, so like it's basic. If you look at this, it's not really, it can't be put into one category. It's just this, it's in a crossroads of civilizations, basically. So vaguely nomadic, vaguely East Asian, vaguely Soviet, and now it's just going into the sort of modern world, I suppose. So yeah, it's basically like a crossroads of civilization. It's a sort of unique place. And the thing that makes it unique, I believe, is this as well as the language. So I thought I'd talk quickly about the Mongolian language itself. And I thought I'd start with the Wikipedia article for Mongolian, which says 6.2 million cited. I'm putting import into this fact because if you didn't know anything else, you'd think, yes, so there are 6 million Mongolian speakers. There's a Mongolian Wikipedia, um, 6 million users. The unfortunate reality is that's not correct. There's a lot of like politics, etc., behind this, but the main thing is there are 3 million people in Mongolia, and then which is basically the whole population. And then there are about, I think, 6 million Mongols that live in China. Of those 6 million, about half speak Mongolian, but they use a different writing system. And because Mongolia and Inner Mongolia have been separated for, years and well, decades really, a lot of terminology and language, etc., has diverged. So um, if you think about the Mongolian Wikipedia itself, which is the Wikipedia written in Cyrillic, you only really have a population of 3 million you can get from. You can sort of help, I guess, people in Inner Mongolia, but again, it's just completely different at this point. You also have other Mongolic languages, so Buryat, there's Kalmyk, so those are both in Russia, and you also have like other dialects such as Oirat, but only Buryat and Kazmik have their own editions of Wikipedia. I'll go through them very briefly during this presentation. But yeah, so this is basically Mongolian. And if I just expand upon the whole differences of the whole Mongolian and Mongolia versus Inner Mongolia, you have different scripts. So Inner Mongolia still uses the traditional alphabet, which is written vertically, whereas Mongolia mostly uses Cyrillic. Terminology is different. As an example, it's basic stuff like economics would have different words in Inner Mongolia versus in Mongolia. And aside from that, because the main professional language in Mongolia is Mongolian. But if you want to do professional things in China, you need to know Chinese. The whole Mongolian translation aspect of it is usually like not that thought out. This is not just my opinion, but a few papers that I've read basically said that. And you can actually look at that in on these two images here. So on the right-hand side, you have a McDonald's in Inner Mongolia. And on the left-hand side, you have a tray of Burger King in Mongolia, so in the north. So if you look at the Inner Mongolian one, it might look more like natural, more traditional, right? Like you have the Mongolian writing, etc. Looks Mongolian. But if you read it, the Mongolian just says Mai Dang Lo, which is just the Chinese for McDonald's. It's not actually in Mongolian, it's just transcribed. So it's this sort of like superficial thing that's happening there. Um, and it also just goes to show that the language there is sort of dying, which is sad, but it's just how it is. And if you look at the Burger King tray in Mongolia, you can see English writing, you can see basically transliterated English into Cyrillic. So the text at the bottom there that says Whopper, double Whopper, triple Whopper, it's literally just that in Cyrillic. But you also get bits of Mongolian at the left-hand side, which is basically saying we do free delivery within 500 meters. But yeah, this is basically the difference between these two. And for purposes of this presentation, we'll only be really thinking about Cyrillic. But just because Mongolian script is still the main sort of traditional, I think national script is the new term, we still have to think about it when we contribute. So what about Mongolian in Mongolia, right? So as mentioned before, yes, everything is basically in Cyrillic, but Mongolian script is still used in a sort of decorative fashion. So this is a picture I took a couple of years ago in Hufsgut, which is a northern province of Mongolia. This is the provincial library, and you get a bunch of texts here. Like you get basically get Mongolian script that says library, um, central museum. Museum is just muzey from Russian, but it's written in Mongolian script. And at the bottom, if you sort of squint your eyes, you still get a bunch of like English text as well. So this is actually very common in Mongolia. You get the decorative Mongolian script. The actual text will be in Cyrillic, but then you get like additional decorative, cool like English titles if it's more of a touristy thing. And the language itself is a Mongolic language, as in there are other Mongolian languages, but just because, it seems to be a common thing now where, there's a Mongolia, a Mongolian, and that's it. But the reality is, it's complicated, right? As mentioned before, it's written in Cyrillic and Mongolian script, very different writing systems. And the grammar is a subject, object, verb type thing. And it makes use of these chained words. I believe it's called agglutinative languages. But as an example, this is sort of like a joke word that people use to explain how, these chained words work. So, that's this word here. And the meaning is basically with my fellow people who perform electrification. So you just keep adding suffixes until it makes, these sort of phrases. And it's very similar, I guess, to like Hungarian and Turkish, which is why they've been sort of grouped into some languages previously, language groups previously, but in reality, not really. So hopefully that was a vaguely interesting introduction into the language and culture, but I thought now we'd actually go into Wikipedia itself. So the Mongolian Wikipedia. So this was established in 2004. This was just 3 years after the English Wikipedia. And just as a trivia thing, the old logo of Wikipedia used to have a bit of Mongolian script there. There was a Mongolian I right here. Unfortunately, that's been removed in the new logo. They claim it exists on the backside, but you can't really see it. So, oh well. And when it comes to the stats, it's not very interesting, but I thought I'd just quickly compare Mongolian to English. So we have about 24,000 articles, 109,000 pages. The edits per page, it's seven. I'll get into this a bit later. It looks good, but maybe not. Active users, 120, again with caveats, because a lot of them would be like bots without bot flags, or just random people not necessarily doing things for Mongolian Wikipedia, but just doing like mass edits. And then two admins. Again, there's a caveat where if you look at the list of admins, I think it says three, but one of them is, I think, like an auto moderator thing. But yeah, this is at a glance what Mongolian Wikipedia looks like. Elsewhere on Wikipedia, I mentioned before that there are other Mongolian languages, and indeed, on Wikipedia there is a Buryat, which is a Mongolic language spoken in the Baikal Lake region, so right north of Mongolia, and then there's a Kalmyk Wikipedia as well. So the Kalmyks are Mongolic people who live next to the Caspian Sea, so also in Russia. There's also a Mongolian Wiktionary, which is actually pretty decent. I believe there was actually a bit of work done from the National University to populate articles here. And the Mongolian, sorry, there's also an incubator project for Mongolian script. There are various issues here. I don't think this will actually happen anytime soon, but there is an attempt. And the incubator page, I believe, was actually dead for a while, and it's been either they fixed it or I was able to find it again. But this is what it looks like right now. So this is the sort of test Mongolian script Wikipedia edition. And since this is we're all English speakers here, if we talk about the English Wikipedia has a wiki project Mongols. It's a bit dormant. I believe this is sort of part of Wiki Project Central Asia. But yeah, it does exist. You get a few enthusiasts do like mass edits, etc. And I believe I forgot his name, but something like Airship Jungleman or someone. They were doing quite a lot of work just trying to get a lot of articles into good article stats, etc. But we need more people here. We need more experts here. And if you look at the stuff that was done beforehand, a lot of it might be out of date. So I just thought, as an example, the one of the biggest things that Wiki Project Mongols did was, I think it was back in 2008, was formalize the naming conventions for Mongolian and Mongolian names, and that might need a bit of tweaking because it's just not, it doesn't align with reality anymore. In that the rules said we need to use Mongolian sort of ways of writing surnames and given names, but when you actually look at the usage, no one uses that. So this is the official site for the president of Mongolia, Hurulsuk Okhna, whereas the English Wikipedia is still stuck on Okhnagin Hurulsuk. We will either need to, overhaul these naming conventions or change them or have additional caveats. But I think this is something that we need to think about just because, people use this as a source of information. And if it's this confusing, it's a bit difficult. So that's one thing. However, I thought, yeah, we'll go back to the Mongolian Wikipedia for now. The MetaWiki has a tell us about your Wikipedia questionnaire, and I thought I could just sort of use that to explain the Mongolian Wikipedia, um, sorry, as an overview. So, contributors. Stats can be difficult to interpret. What's your impression of how many steady contributors do you have? So it would be about 5 to 10, which is a bit, I think, uh, it might be a bit sorry, it might be exaggerating a bit. In reality, it might actually be closer to like 2 to 3, but we do get like users that just suddenly do a bunch of edits and then just leave, etc. So on average, maybe about five, right? What about native speakers? Are your contributors mostly native speakers? Yes, but with a caveat. The caveat is that the language is going through a lot of, changes, which I'll go into later, but also that a lot of the contributors are young. So they're not necessarily fluent in, professional Mongolian, let's say. So that's sort of an issue. What about location? So where do your contributors live? Um, when I started this presentation, I thought I just leave it with half-half because that's how I thought. But now I think it's actually more people abroad than compared to in Mongolia. And I think, yeah, there's a variety of reasons for this, but that's just how it is. And how common is it that your contributors meet in real life? Not common at all. I've never actually been to any Mongolian Wikipedia meetups. I don't think they've actually ever happened, but it's something that we definitely need. And I'll get into this a bit later as well. What about other Wikipedia? So do you have any special contacts? Not really, sort of. As mentioned before, we have other Mongolic Wikipedias, and one of the main contributors right now on the Mongolian side was an admin for a while at the Buryat Wikipedia. Not out of choice, but because I think there was a bunch of politics or, toxicity happening on the Mongolian Wikipedia side, so he was sort of forced out. And because he could speak both Buryat and, Mongolian, he was just like, all right, I'll just do this for now. So yeah, that's one. There's also, as mentioned, the Kalmyk Wikipedia, but aside from a shout out on the Mongolian Wikipedia front page, no other real contacts are there. What about translations? So mostly English and Russian. Russian because, history and Cyrillic, and a lot of contributors actually are fluent in Russian, which I found a bit interesting because they're also young, but yeah, that's still there. And there's also a substrate of German. This is a bit controversial because basically the history is that we had a sort of toxic admin living in Germany, who started molding the Mongolian Wikipedia in their image, in that they were using a lot of like German-based terminology, etc., and then translating that. But the reality is that most terminology isn't translated like that. There's either a set terminology or it's translated from like English or Russian. But because of that sort of German aligned admin, there's a few things that we need to fix, which is a bit interesting, but it's just another more work to be done. Organization support. Is there a chapter in your country, etc.? Not in Mongolia, unfortunately. Are there any work groups in other organizations? Yes and no. It's in that not basically the answer is no, but there does seem to be like random people or random organizations that just start doing things. And the commonalities behind these efforts is that they never really ask the existing contributors. So they just like do something and then it's there. And I actually managed to find a Wikipedia article, sorry, a news article about one of those people. And I believe this um, person was the first to get a grant from like the Wikimedia Foundation for Mongolia. But this was like sort of like an offline outreach type thing that was done. But yeah, there was not really any like sort of group discussions about this. This is mostly like, one man, one woman armies doing things. Wikipedia and the linguistic community. Is there a language institute? Do you have contact, etc.? There is a language institute. I actually believe there might be multiple, but we don't actually have contact with them. And there are various reasons for this. And I will talk about the language stuff a bit during this presentation as well. What does the public outreach look like? Fairly sporadic. And basically that means none. If someone does something randomly, that happens, but there's no group effort to do much, right? And what about feedback from readers? Occasionally, there's a bit of stuff with like on talk pages, on social media, etc. But in general, people seem to think that Wikipedia is like this monolith that does things instead of thinking of it as something that they can contribute to. So the feedback is usually like, why don't you do this? Instead of why can't we do this, right? But yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about, I think. And what other encyclopedias exist in your language? So when it comes to general purpose stuff, there's a Britannica and a Concise Britannica. There's an 80s, so very Soviet era children's and young people encyclopedia that was, I think, reissued recently. I don't know if they actually edited all the propaganda, etc., but it was reissued and it might actually be public domainable. Um, just because it was done in the Soviet era, basically. But this is like a future, I think, project. And there are other specialized encyclopedias, including stuff online, including stuff that was created by, government agencies, but they all have a giant copyright tag on all of them, so we can't use them directly. And the sad thing is that a lot of them seem to just die after a few years. Um, and I'm just thinking if it was public domain, if it was published under a Creative Commons type language, license, we could have maybe archived that, but oh well. And regarding content, so what about does your edition concentrate on topics, on certain topics, etc.? And the answer is yes. There's a lot of focus on Mongolian history and culture. Um, there are issues, obviously, with sourcing, etc. But when it comes to Mongolian things, I have been able to use the Mongolian Wikipedia to just find out about random things. An example is that so in the Paris Paralympics, Mongolia did quite well. There was a shot putter that won, I think, a silver medal, and I was watching an interview, and he mentioned how his dad was this famous wrestler from like the 70s or something. No articles about that wrestler, but I just Googled his name and I get a Mongolian Wikipedia article about a random like provincial wrestling tournament from like the 70s where his name is there. And it's like, oh, that was really good. I'm actually able to use it for my own things. So that was nice. And when it comes to text donations, older encyclopedias, unofficially, just because there is no Wikimedia Foundation or whatever. It's mostly just been like asking random people, asking random organizations. So about 10 years ago, I had a friend in the Mongolian drama theater sort of organization there. And I asked them if they had anything they wanted to do, etc. And they basically had like biographies of like a ton of Mongolian yeah, like basically like theater production people, artists, etc. And we were able to just copy over a few biographies there with attribution saying, this is free content. But yes, this is all unofficial. And language, I mentioned this a few times, but is there a generally accepted norm? Yes, there are many norms. It's complicated, and I will go through this a bit later because I think it's quite interesting. And when it comes to different spellings and dialects, how do you do it? We don't really do this. We are using, as of now, just Hakh. So Mongolian, the official Mongolian dialect of Mongolia, which is Hakh Mongolian. And if we have like multiple words, we're just using redirects. So there is no other official policy here. Um, so that's sort of the questionnaire bit done. I thought that was a okay overview, hopefully. And then I thought I could just talk about a few other things. So this would be growth, usage, and the quality. So if you look at the growth, it's okay. It's stable there. And again, this is only talking about the count of pages, right? So if you look at this, there seems to be like a bit of a push around 2014 and maybe a bit more of a push since the start of the year or even like 2023, but it's fairly stable. And you can sort of see why if you look at the active editors. This is all the way back from 2006 to 2024. The average has never gone above like 10 or 15. It's always been very steady like this. You can see that there was like a jump around 2016. I'm not actually sure what that was. It might actually just be sock puppets because there was sort of like an admin, I think, war back then, which I only recently heard about. But in general, right now, there are 25,000 articles, and yeah, it's still growing bit by bit. What about usage? So with the Mongolian Wikipedia, it gets about 3 million humans per month, a total of 5 to 7, but 3 million are if you exclude all the bots, etc. When you think about page views from Mongolia, the country, there are about 2 million page views for both. So almost an equal-ish amount of people use the English Wikipedia and the Mongolian Wikipedia. So they both get about 2 million. When you think about the other languages, I believe the most popular one was the Russian Wikipedia, which gets about a 250,000 views a month. And then if you go down, it's like Chinese, Japanese, German. I thought I'd add the Kazakh Wikipedia, which is KK at the end there, because I thought it might get a few views from the Kazakh community, but not really, I guess. Just 11,000 views per month. If you look at the usage data, like the usage graphs, it's actually pretty interesting and maybe a bit sad as well. So basically, if you drill down, it seems to spike every year in September. It goes down a bit in winter, goes up a bit, and then goes down in June. And that's basically the Mongolian school year. So you get start in September, you get winter holidays in about January, February, and then summer holidays start in July. So you get this like thing here. And if you look at this, it's actually like increasing and going down, etc. The nice way of looking at it, I believe, is, school children want to use Wikipedia and, people are really trying to use it. And the use is increasing, like if you just draw a line there. I think the sad thing is like the sad view is that every September, a bunch of new school kids go to Wikipedia wanting to find things, are inevitably disappointed that it's not up to scratch, and then it just goes down and no one really uses it in summer. However, I think this can be a good thing, and I'll talk about that later. When it comes to usage by device, most usage until about 2020 is seems to be desktop, and since starting from 2020, it's now dominated by mobile. So that the blue lines there are mobile views. And if you compare the Mongolian Wikipedia to the English one, when it comes to Mongolian, mobile is getting about 3 times the views compared to about 2 times for the English Wikipedia. So yeah, it does seem to be like a mobile first. It does seem like a sort of like a mobile first generation is, sort of being created here. Desktop usage is still very stable, and when it comes to the app, it's tiny usage. It's about what the max was about 25,000 views there. So yeah, it's not a lot. When it comes to the 2020 jump, though, I think the main reason is just internet penetration. So if you look at this graph here, and I'll bring this graph up a bit later as well. Up until about 2017 or like let's say like late 2010s, internet usage was only really about 20-30%. And then it's really jumped up in the past, let's say 5-6 years. And I believe this is just mobile. You have like a generation of kids, it's especially just with mobile. And if you look at this, it looks like, yes, if we play our cards right, we will be able to get a sort of internet ready generation that might contribute back, etc., to Wikipedia. But we really need to look at this and just think of the future and just have it, prepare things for that potential generation. And this actually might be vaguely similar for a lot of countries as well. So maybe something to think about. For what it's worth, this is why I mentioned that the whole school year going up and down thing might actually be good because we know that Mongolian school kids do use the Mongolian Wikipedia, and we now know that internet usage is almost at 100%. So, you know, sounds like opportunities. So now, finally, we have the whole quality discussion. So I think this is where, yeah, things get a bit hairy. So when you look at the depth, which is a Wikipedia metric, I think it's something to do with like the number of articles and like how many people have edited the articles, how often it's been edited, etc. And if you look at the depth, Mongolian Wikipedia is doing quite all right. It's ranked 33rd. And keep in mind that there are currently 323 Wikipedias. So it's doing very, very well if you just look at this. And if you look at sample of articles, which is basically like a number of articles that are deemed to be, essential to any Wikipedia, how many of those do you have? How long are those articles? And if you look at that metric, Mongolian is about 82nd. So not that bad as well. Unfortunately, if you just start looking at the Wikipedia, you get issues there. So of the 25,000 articles, almost half, so 10,000 are less than 2.5 kilobytes in size. That's not great, right? And even the 5,000th largest article is pretty small. And I just thought I'd give some examples here. So when it comes to 2.5 kilobytes, this is what that looks like. It's either what's on the left, which is a very small, stub article with a bunch of info boxes, or text, and the text is basically a one, two, three, maybe like four paragraphs of text. So this is a 2.5 kilobyte article here. So you can think that with the Mongolian Wikipedia, half the articles are smaller than this, which is not a great place to be. If you also look at this, you can also see that there's a ton of stuff missing. So missing categories, missing sources, um, what name you, right? Even like a broken redirect here. So there's quite a lot of stuff to do here. The other thing to note is that the left-hand article was probably written by a bot many years ago, when this was common, and it's just sort of been grandfathered in where you can't delete it. You can't really like I mean, as in like you don't want to delete it, but you kind of do, and it's a hard thing to just think about, but it's there, right? And then what about the 5,000th longest article? It should be a pretty good article, right? This is just out of, I just did this, just basically like taking it out of the hat. And it's tiny. This is an article on the Rolling Stones. If you take out all the, info boxes, all the tables, which are that it's just copied over from the English Wikipedia because it's just, song names, album names. The only like real text is this. So you can tell that quality wise, yeah, there's a lot to do. And the whole just saying 25,000 articles is just not enough to actually, get at the problem and understand what's going on. However, what about the new articles? So those two were fairly, I think, old articles. But now when you think about the articles that are being created now, it's still not amazing, I will say, but there's a somewhat higher barrier to entry in that we're just deleting stuff if it's just like one or two sentences long. There's no use. There's no point in that being a Wikipedia article, for example. So these are articles that were created, I think, a couple weeks ago. So the left one is about change management, so like a project man, like a company organizational thing. And on the right-hand side is a biography of Abel Tasman. And both of them are not bad. Few issues, again, the right-hand side, it has the images, but it doesn't have the categories. It probably could have an info box somewhere. It could probably have a few more um, links, maybe some templates, etc. But in general, it seems that the new stuff is getting better and maybe, making things a bit better bit by bit. So that's good. And then here, I thought I'd just quickly talk about just the perception of Wikipedia, um, bought from other Mongolians. So I was lucky enough to just stumble upon this, where let's say, influencer development economist that's fairly popular on Mongolian Twitter asked the question, why doesn't the Mongolian Wikipedia get better, in Mongolian? So I tried to just synthesize a few of the answers there. And so the first thing is text is copied from other pages directly. This basically means that people think there's a bunch of copyright infringement on Wikipedia, as in they look at a site, they go onto Wikipedia, and then they just see the same sort of text there. This was, I think, true to some degree in the past, but now it actually might be the reverse in that just other sites copying things from Wikipedia, and then, people get confused, right? The second bit, there's not a lot of users. There's a tiny market. The English speakers will just use English. And this is a very common sentiment. And even the use of market, I think, betrays a few things in that they're thinking of, monetizing things a bit more, right? It's not really a market, it's just the people. But in general, yes, English speakers will use the English version just because the Mongolian Wikipedia is good enough. And the people who know English, the people who only know Mongolian would like to know Mongolian, but even they can't contribute to the Mongolian Wikipedia because unfortunately you do need to know a foreign language to contribute, especially for these small language versions. And I also believe that instead of bothering with the Mongolian Wikipedia, if you do not know English, people are just resorting to machine translation. So just Google Translate a Wikipedia article in English and then just sort of understand the gist. The third point here, nobody's going to search for anything. This is just sort of like an anti-intellectual thing where, you know, instead of actually looking up, Googling things, people just ask things on Facebook. And I think that's sort of like a common problem nowadays. I don't know how anyone can fix this, but it's cited by a few people as why Wikipedia isn't getting better. Everybody's too busy in traffic. Yes, Mongolians are very busy, and I will get into that a bit later. But yeah, there's just not enough time to contribute to volunteer projects if you're always busy, right? And then needs more organization and needs to be run like an actual project with funding. Yes, um, it would be great if we had a Wikimedia Mongolia doing things and just organizing things and just being here in Australia and just talking to other Wikipedians like this, you can feel more energized and just like think about it a bit more. But unfortunately, Mongolia doesn't have that. And as mentioned before, a lot of the contributors live overseas, so it's a bit hard. Basically, no one's asked the actual contributors, so that's something that really we need to fix, right? So in short, yes, with contributors, there are few, mostly residing abroad, not great. Engagement, almost non-existent, not great. The language itself, it is vibrant with some caveats. It's fine. We'll get into that. Usage and growth, both steady, and quality is, let's say, questionable, but it depends on the subject. So if you want to read about Mongolian things, you might actually get a few good articles, but it depends. So this is the main bit here. So if that's sort of like the overview of the Mongolian Wikipedia, but what about like the main challenges? So if you just look at that bit of the presentation, you can sort of see what the main challenge is, which is really just getting more people in. But aside from that, we also get like other sort of challenges just because we're a small um, language community. So I'll just go through that. And the main themes are like, yeah, tech, the language, people issues, and then a very quick segue into just the AI and politics stuff. So yes, we have a lot of challenges when it comes to tech. So most of MediaWiki remains untranslated into Mongolian, and translations are done on a separate sort of service, let's say, which is Translate Wiki. And basically, this is something that we need to improve upon, or otherwise it just looks kind of unprofessional. So if you look at this bit here, the front page, yeah, the main bits are translated, but whenever you just like, click on a few like additional menus, you start getting English text here. And it's very common like that. If you look at the stats, the most important messages, about 96% are translated. There are caveats to this in that some of them are old translations, some of them are not correct translations, and some of them are just correct, but the context is wrong. And I believe that's sort of an issue with Translate Wiki, where you can translate things like sort of in bulk, but um, you know, if you have like one word in English that refers to two concepts, that doesn't mean that that one word will also refer to the same two concepts in a different language. And that really means that sometimes you just have to translate something, just keep refreshing until you find where it's actually used and then sort of translate it correctly. And because that wasn't done for everything, you get these like stilted bad translations for a lot of things. But that's like another issue, right? We don't even have most of it translated in the first place. So as you can see, these are the stats. If you look at the mobile app, it's even worse. It's basically not translated. And who knows, maybe if we did translate all of the, let's say at least the apps to all the Wikimedia languages, you might get more engagement, etc. there. But yeah, just the theory. Another tech challenge we face is spell check. So this is from the movie Easy A. And I just remember watching this movie for the first time and basically thinking what I'm thinking now, which is that would be nice if we had spell check for everything. The problem is that spell check, while it exists from Mongolian, it's never been ubiquitous. It's never been free. Mongolian language software is in general always for profit. And I think it's just, like issues with government, governance, etc. But while like even like AI models and text to speech, text recognition, all of this exists, but they're all behind a paywall. They're all a bit expensive, and it also means that you can't really integrate them into all software if it's not like free, right? So this is an issue. I know there's been like a lot. of talk about, teaching standards, whatever, decreasing. But the reality is like in English, I believe that can be sort of papered over by software. You have spell check, you get a nice red squiggly line at the bottom, but you don't have that for Mongolian. So yeah, it's sometimes like just, yeah, spelling is just not great in general. There's another issue here, which is the tech barrier, in that Wikipedia, I believe, used to be a bit, well, it used to be simpler. And that's just the case for all software. Like software, as it becomes more complex, it just becomes more, well, more complex, and it takes longer to do things. So as an example, I remember translating the namespaces of stuff like, MediaWiki template for the Mongolian Wikipedia quite easily on Wikipedia. But to do that now requires like a ticket to be created on Fabricator, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that requires, tech knowledge. It's okay for me because that's what I do for a living. But if you only know, if you know Mongolian, you know English, and you want to do things, you kind of have to learn about all this stuff. So, um, just tech, how to raise tickets, how to comment on things, how to just, push issues, how to even look at bits of the code. So yeah, that's one issue. And I will say that the community has been great. And just I think I created 3 or 4 tickets, and most of them has been completed already. And this is to do with there's a bit of like search optimization done, localizing stuff, and a few logo changes, etc. Um, and then yeah, so like aside from tech, this is I think a very interesting part, which is just the language itself. So Mongolian is a language in flux. It's written in Cyrillic, yes, but is also used to be written in Mongolian script, and now it's also written in Latin informally, which basically means that there are debates now on, spelling of words, loan words, newly coined words, professional terminology, and even, what script we should use for, everything. So I didn't mention this here, but officially, Mongolia is supposed to transition over into Mongolian script, so the vertical script next year. That's not going to happen. But that's still something that they keep pushing because it's a basically there's people don't I believe oh um, just admit which is basically people just don't view Cyrillic as their own, which makes sense. Cyrillic was only introduced back in the I believe 40s to 50s, so all of this is new, right? Um, And then when it comes to just the language itself, this is actually a very interesting study that I found, I think about a year ago, which is Mongolish in post-communist Mongolia. This is actually a researcher in Perth, and she talks about just how kids are speaking not in Mongolian per se, but just a mix of Mongolian and English. And then one reason people do that is just because people use text speak. So when people text each other, people barely use Cyrillic. It's mostly Latin. I'd say maybe like 80% of my texts in Mongolian are written in English, characters. And by doing that, you just naturally start copying English words and just English spelling. So it just turns into this whole thing. That's not to say that we have to like deal with this problem on Wikipedia, but it's just, the language is in flux and it's very weird to deal with when you don't have a lot of contributors, right? So I thought I'd just like give a few examples and hopefully this will be interesting, right? So, this is the spelling of just one word. So the word Garuda, anyone from Indonesia might know. I think there's a Garuda, Indonesia, like airline. But basically, this is a mythological bird. I think the English equivalent would be like harpy or what is it, like griffin or something, right? But so this is a mythological bird. It's the symbol of Ulaanbaatar, the Mongolian capital, and there's a whole debate about how to spell this. Um, there's basically 2 spellings. It's either Gardi or Gar, and then this we call it a softener character. Gard. So it's either spelled like this or that. For years during the Soviet era, especially, people were using the qert, the first spelling here. So there's even this popular movie from 1983 that had this. People use it just basically everywhere, but they've changed the spelling now so that we're supposed to use the second spelling. This in and of itself is not an issue, but they've just removed the old spelling everywhere as well. So basically, when this happens, we have to make a choice, right? So do we use the new spelling that's sort of just from diktat, or do we use the spelling that's actually used everywhere? Don't know. But yeah, this is one of the things that we encounter a lot of the time, right? I tried to just do a bit of research about, how to, if what was actually happening. And if you look at the Google Trends, the old spelling is still there. If you look at the Google results, Google doesn't give you the number of results anymore, which is sad. But if you look at the results, you get the first few, which are Wikipedia, and then it starts changing. But these are all very new changes. And I'm not sure if following a random, let's say, like news website is the correct thing to do, right? Like if most people in real life use this, do we use the new spelling? I'm not sure. Basically, it's something that we need to think about. Basically, we just need to ask a bunch of people here, which comes back to the whole people problem. Another example is the spelling of the suffix ing. So this is just the genitive suffix. So for example, computer is computer. Computering is, the computers or of the computer. They changed the rules where it used to be that if you had a foreign loan word, you'd use the ing, which is the two characters there. But now they've changed it so that I won't get into the grammar, but basically it's wrong. You have to use the other word. This is a small thing, but it's just they keep doing this. And we have a situation on the Mongolian Wikipedia now where you have like the articles are spelled one way, the categories are spelled one way, etc. So there's just like no consistency here. And yeah, I just thought I'd give you examples, right? So Olympiahara, the Olympic Committee, still uses that spelling on the main on their main building here. This is actually my bachelor's diploma, where I did a degree in computer networking. It uses the old spelling as well, but this officially now would be wrong. And if you use the government issued spell checkers, it'll give you the red squiggly line. So what do we do? Not sure. Basically, yeah, Mongolian language policy has changed a lot of things. People are not used to the new spellings. And there's also this is a bit controversial, but there's also what seems like this massive gaslighting campaign from the Mongolian government where they're like, the spelling has not changed at all. But it has though. I can look at like random dictionaries that I have here and just look at the old spellings. Obviously, the retort to that is, no, those are the wrong dictionaries. Okay, so which are the right ones? I think the answer to this really is, yeah, consensus. We need to have consensus. Unfortunately, we don't have enough people, so that's an issue. But the answer to this will always be consensus. Um, and yeah, that's all we can do. However, with Google and OpenAI or whatever, we kind of know what the consensus of sort of the world is, right? Like if you think about LLMs and ChatGPT, it's basically fed on all the information that was available and then just spits it out based on that, right? So if you think about it, ChatGPT should know how Mongolian is spelt according to what sort of spelling, what sort of data it was already given. So I thought I'd just do an sort of like an experiment to see what spelling is actually used by people or what ChatGPT. So list the titles in Mongolian wrestling. So the Garuda thing is also a title in wrestling. What does ChatGPT think? Old spelling. Okay. Where were the 2004 Olympics hosted? Still use the old spelling. Okay. What was the computer's role in history? Waffles on and on, but at the end, yes, it still uses the old spelling. So when, you have dictionaries using the old spelling, ChatGPT using the old spelling, but like new news articles, etc., using the new spelling, what should we do? It's a bit weird, right? And if we try to think about other, let's say, authoritative sources, What about, let's say, the Australian government? Not exactly the government, but SBS. So SBS actually has a Mongolian podcast edition, and I just thought what they used, and they use the old spelling as well. So it's a bit interesting, yeah. And I think the reason I waffled on about this quite a bit is because I think it's very important. If you don't know about XKCD, it's this comic that's been going on for like years and years. It's very popular in like the tech community. But there's this comic here about, they call it, sorry, the comic name I think is Cytogenesis, the edition name. But basically, people are using Wikipedia as facts. Even if a random sentence on Wikipedia doesn't have a source or whatever, people will read that and then just sort of assume that's knowledge. And it's sort of and it can happen in multiple ways, right? So with the Mongolian thing, yes, you read that and you can see that it's using the old spelling or new spelling, and then sort of adjust how you spell things based on that. But also, um, Wikipedia is used for all of these like AI models, etc. So if Wikipedia is wrong, everything aside from that, everything that's generated from that is wrong. It's the whole concept of, garbage in, garbage out. So unless we actually fix this properly, it sort of pollutes, basically everything, even the language, basically. And again, pollutes might be a strong or weird word, but it's more just making it non-standard, I guess. Yeah. So, um, moving on, sorry, not moving on, but like continuing with the whole language theme, there's also, yeah, issues with loanwords. So, as mentioned before, Mongolian is written in Cyrillic, which meant, sorry, it was written in Cyrillic, and also it was very close to the Soviet Union, which meant that most concepts, scientific terminology, etc., it was just taken from Russian. And because it's the same Cyrillic, you can just use the Russian spellings. And that's been a common thing that's been done for a while. But now what? All the new terminology actually comes from English, and you need to sort of transcribe that English into Cyrillic. So it's just very interesting, right? So stuff, let's say, words like international would have been international in the past because, that's the Russian way of saying it. But now people just say international, and you have these like weird spellings. And the other thing is that the Mongolian language committee. I'm not actually sure of the full name, but it's sort of like what the French Academy does, where they don't like foreign words to be, fully um, integrated into the language. So these words are always in this sort of weird place where it's not really a Mongolian word, but everyone uses them. But how do you spell it? No idea. It's only like verbal. Again, consensus is important here, but yeah, I thought I'd talk about this a bit. And with loanwords, we actually, this has been noted before. This is on I think, random talk page about the Mongolian script edition. But yeah, there was a user complaining about how the Mongolian Wikipedia page for beer only used the Mongolian word for beer, which is yellow kumis. So shara arig, which is yellow arig. Arig is fermented horse milk. So there's a whole thing where a beer would be called yellow fermented horse milk. I believe in Inner Mongolia, wine is called red fermented horse milk, etc. But the thing is, in the history of drinking, no one has ever said, let's have some yellow fermented horse milk. It's always just, let's have some piv, which is the Russian word. This wasn't on the Mongolian Wikipedia at all. And it's just because that's how things are. People are sort of being conservative about that. I have changed it so that at least there's a redirect, and I just mentioned Sharatic or Piv is blah, 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 blah. So that's one thing we can do, right? But yes, these things have been noted before, but just because of the lack of community participation, these have just remained issues. This is something that I mentioned quickly before, but when it comes to tech, yes, everything is in, not everything, but a lot of things are still in Latin. So these are texts that I get on my Mongolian SIM card. I put it on roaming. But as you can see here, it's written in Mongolian, but it's in Latin. And if you look at the country names, for example, they're just taken from English, right? And this actually trips up a lot of people when they move or travel to Mongolia, where, oh, I know Cyrillic, I can understand things, I can use Google Translate. But the reality is people text like this, and this can't be Google translated. So it causes issues. But the other issue as well is that I believe that because of this, and because of the lack of like Mongolian keyboards being, ubiquitous, etc., for a while, a lot of the population is almost like illiterate when it comes to Cyrillic typing. There used to be like converters where you can convert this sort of text speak into Cyrillic, etc. Like people would use that very like a lot. Um, but yeah, this is an issue. This might actually be improving a bit just because, smartphones have Cyrillic keyboards, etc. now. But yeah, for me at least, 80% of my chats are still like this. If I use Cyrillic, it's sort of viewed as archaic, which is why I almost only use Cyrillic with my dad. So that's sort of a thing. So if you just think about that, it's basically, yeah, just rapidly changing language. There's a lack of standardization. There's a language body that often arbitrarily, often changes the rules. Spell check is absent. This is mentioned in the tech side as well. And then finally, there's an absence of consensus. So even if everything is bad, we can still sort of make a decision and back it up by consensus if we had people. So important thing, people challenges. I will not go very deep into this because I think this is very common. But yeah, if I just quickly go through them, haven't really been any meetups that I'm aware of. There are multiple Mongolian Wikipedia Facebook groups. A lot of them, I think, just sort of fizzled out because of toxic users, spam, etc. But yeah, they do exist. We only have two admins. I actually made contact with a very frequent contributor now just a week ago and suggested that he could maybe put in a request for becoming an admin as well, which could help. But yeah, right now we just have two, and the only other admin I've never actually been able to talk to. There's a lot of lone wolves on the Mongolian Wikipedia. Training and docs are needed for new users. So if you don't know English, you're sort of out of luck. So we need to really make that accessible to users. The village pump is very idle. There was a sad thing where I put in a post about how it was the 20th anniversary of the Mongolian Wikipedia opening, and I got no reactions, which was very sad. But it's just, I think we need to have that more in your face, and we need to have that, visible. When you think about a bit of the history, there was a period with a hostile admin that I think sort of threw people off a bit. And in fact, I mentioned how I started more work on the Mongolian Wikipedia in 2021. As luck would have it, that's kind of when the admin was kicked out. For reference, I think they were banned globally for sock puppetry. And that was actually the whole German adjacent admin that I mentioned before. There's also unannounced group projects, as in I could see that there would be like university classes that would just upload or just create a bunch of new articles that were basically just bits of, translated bits from random books, et cetera, et cetera. And it took a long time to just clean that up. And if we had sort of like a heads up on that happening, etc., that would have been good. But that hasn't happened beforehand, and it's really a coordination people problem, I guess. Yeah. And yeah, as I mentioned before, projects have occurred in the past, but um, yeah, they didn't really involve the community much, and some of them I would say were a bit opportunistic. So there's a figure in Mongolia that like sort of a journalist politician that created a Wikipedia clone, I think back in the 2010s. And I think that sort of siphoned off quite a few contributors, including myself, because it was a competition, right? But then after that, it just died. The website was just shut down, and which was a bit sad. But yeah, these are a few of the challenges that we have. So basically, we need contributors. Where are they? Yeah, if we just talk about that. We all know that this is already the biggest challenge. I've been seeing these articles pop up more and more. It's on The Guardian, existential crisis, especially with the whole AI stuff, right? So with Mongolia, I think these are sort of the main things right now, which is firstly, people are busy working, as you know, we're all busy. There's a lack of a tech-savvy older user base. So especially when I was, yeah, I've only been more involved with the like in real life side of Wikipedia starting this year, but just interacting with more people, especially like Australia and just SEAP in general. There are a lot of older people with more free time to contribute. I don't think that base exists in Mongolia because of, internet penetration and other issues. But yeah, that's one thing. And obviously other factors. So when it comes to the whole busy thing, this is actually a very interesting stat that no one really knows about even in Mongolia, which is Mongolia has the ninth longest work week in the world. And it actually was it was actually the longest work week just like 2 or 3 years ago. But yeah, this just seems to be the case. And when you actually think about it, yeah, Wikipedia is a hobby reserved for those with free time, a computer, and an internet connection. So if you don't have free time, you can't really do anything. This is a sad bit there. When you think about people with free time, young people, yes, and that's in fact the core of our users and contributors now. But unfortunately, they're just inexperienced. And the media landscape is such that I personally believe that younger people's Mongolian is very different from like formal Mongolian, let's say, and it's just non-standard. So it's hard for them, including myself, to contribute to that. Basically, we need older people with, better language skills. And yeah, I think one big reason as well is this. I showed this graph beforehand, but yeah, internet penetration wasn't great, and now it is. Um, this wouldn't be people with desktops. It would probably be just smartphones, but that's still a demographic, I think, that could be sort of useful to us to, increase contributions, etc. So yeah, that's sort of the people's stuff done. And now I thought I'd just go through the last two bits of the challenges quickly, which is, AI and politics. So with AI, firstly, the translate tool is a bit problematic. We were getting quite a few articles on the Mongolian Wikipedia that were very obviously machine translated, but it takes a bit of time to sort of um, realize it. You start reading, and then it's like, okay, that doesn't make sense. But it takes a lot of time, and I feel like sometimes, especially with like languages like Mongolia, where these tools aren't great anyway, it should just be shut off sometimes. And this is by no means an issue just for Wikipedia. Content generation, so AI is really killing the internet, and it might be okay-ish right now for English users, but for Mongolian, it's been bad for a long time. So just an example, let's say I'm a student who wants to know about quantum computing, but I don't know, English. So I just search quant total. So you get the English Wikipedia article, you get T education there, which is I think like a Mongolian like learning website. Then you get news, and then starting from like I think result five, it's just machine translated nonsense. There are these sites that basically seem to just copy over all of, like the science articles from the English Wikipedia, machine translated into every possible language, add a like MN suffix at the front, and then it's there. And when this is like on the top half of like the search results, this is not good for anyone. And it has the same problem where you start reading it. If you don't know this exists, you start reading it, it kind of makes sense. And then like you're like a paragraph in, and then you're like, what am I reading? Oh, this is just a crap site. But this also means that like if you talk to people about sourcing and references, it's already like a hard thing to explain to younger people, etc., right? But when you say, okay, just Google it, use that, and all the sources are like this, and when the sources have these sort of authoritative names like EITC Academy or whatever, what do you do? Not sure. It's an interesting and difficult situation. And then finally, yeah, keeping up with politics. So there are differences in academic cultures. Um, just it being able to copy things and just, referencing peer review, etc. It's already like a niche subject, but in Mongolia, it's even, I don't niche-er isn't the word, but it's harder in Mongolia as well, just because like sourcing references, etc. That's not a thing that's taught in high schools, etc. It's only starting in university, and even then, it's not great. Um, so yeah, that's one thing that we really need to improve. There's also stuff like, languages and dialect debates. This is the same thing with academic cultures, really, but like you have Mongolian scientists categorize languages, dialects, etc. in one way, and this is completely different from what English does, and sometimes it's different from what the Russians do, etc. So it's like, how do you do this? Ideally, we just use Mongolian sources at least, and then say, okay, this is what's done here, blah, blah, blah. But because most of the sources available are in English, as in at least online, it gets hard. And also, finally, there's the whole historical debates and the whole nationalists, etc., happening. So, especially on the, not especially, just even on like the Mongolian Wikipedia, you get nationalists, like Turkish nationalists, for example, saying, this is actually a Turkish thing or whatever, or like random, people from Kazakhstan saying Genghis Khan was Kazakh. And, a lot of this is just vandalism, really. But sometimes you have people who are writing like full articles, and you're like, that doesn't sound right, but it seems plausible, and it sort of muddies the waters there. So it's really something that we need to think about. When trying to improve things. Yeah. So when it comes to solutions, really, um, it's mostly to do with, I think, people. So that's why I added those emojis there. So with language, we need more people to have a consensus, contributors, consensus quality, consensus, etc. But I do think that aside from this, there could be additional things that we could be doing, right, with even limited resources. So again, this might be controversial, but when it comes to the tech stuff, I do not believe that it's feasible for small languages to keep translating the UI and everything for free because there's just not enough people and it keeps changing and it changes rapidly. I do believe that localization needs to be a paid and sort of like top-down thing when it comes to yeah, when it comes to small languages like this. So yeah, like paid contributors for at least user interfaces, I think would be really interesting. When it comes to language, yes, we need consensus, but as I mentioned, when a lot of these tools are behind paywalls and need to be paid, maybe we can help have like a group subscription or something, or maybe even integrate third-party spell checks. I don't know how that would work or even if it could work, but something like that, or even just having like a scholarship to have, okay, if you contribute blah, you can get a subscription to this. Something like that could be helpful. I'm not sure. When it comes to contributors, yes, we need more, but just from, looking at other people, there's a lot of people who love posting on Facebook. It's not, just political rants and stuff, but you get like Facebook posts about, historical events. And these are from like museums and stuff like that, where they're only using Facebook and social media to share information. If they knew about Wikipedia, or if they could just say, look, all of our contributions from now on, this is a Creative Commons thing. You could just copy that onto Wikipedia and just improve it bit by bit, quite a bit. And yeah, this I think is a demographic that we could target, but unfortunately, we really need people on the ground there. Another thing is the diaspora. So as mentioned, the people with free time and the people who are still currently contributing seem to be overseas. Getting them involved would be great. And I actually know for a fact that the University of Melbourne is going to have a Mongolian Students Association, I believe, starting next semester. So the goal is to at least make contact and see if they can help because there's a lot of, yeah, good talent going around. When it comes to quality, yes, more contributors, but I think we definitely need a like review process with professionals when it comes to small languages. When you think about it, yeah, like Mongolia's population, 3 million, look at how many scientific disciplines there are. Look at how many, different things are being, coined, whatever. There's just not enough people to know all of this. And when you think about like small disciplines, like let's say like AI or whatever, there would only really be like five or what 5 to 10 people total who actually do research and translate terms into this. We really need to make contact with them. How? Maybe universities, maybe other methods, but yeah, that's definitely something that we need to do. And with AI and politics, yeah, consensus. And I think especially with AI, we just need, more tools and, stuff like auto moderator and stuff. And yeah, um, that's basically it really. Yeah. So, that's sort of the whole Wikipedia thing. Sorry, an explanation of what we do and what the Mongolian Wikipedia is. And I thought, right now, sort of like the final sort of thing, I could just talk about how to contribute and how you could help and how I, let's say, like would want people to contribute. So one thing is, yes, contributing with media. Um, Photography is one thing. So if you do travel to Mongolia or if you like manage to find Mongolian things, take a photo, upload it. This used to be a bit harder in the past because Mongolia had restrictive freedom of panorama laws. That's been fixed now. So if you do end up going to Mongolia, just take a picture of every building you can see, upload it. It'll probably be useful. So that's one thing you can do. There's also lots of untapped material online. So just public domain images, libraries, archives, etc. Bits and pieces have mostly been would have been copied over to Commons, but with a lot of them, there's just hasn't been like the systemic um, upload process there. And also just representation in English. So yeah, just creating new articles, etc. Um, it's very easy. There's a lot of information in English online and in libraries. In fact, yeah, just the libraries here are in Australia are just in not Mongolia, I guess, just everywhere except for Mongolia, let's say. They're just much more open. It's just easier to get information. Just go to a library, grab a book. I was never able to do that in Mongolia. And just being able to do that really, I think, gives you a bit more confidence in being able to research and whatever, right? There's also a lot of articles to translate in other Wikipedias, so Russian, German, Chinese, that are not in English. And those are languages that are fairly easy to translate using, machine translation tools, etc. Um, and finally, there's again, it'll be hard to find, obviously, but there's just a lot of concepts and stuff that just has no scholarship whatsoever in English, which I find fascinating. Like an example is what was until very recently the longest article on the Mongolian Wikipedia was about a sort of liberation war that happened in the 19 like 40s, I guess. That has no English language scholarship whatsoever. Like, where would you even start translating that article? The battle has no English name, et cetera, et cetera. And like, if you just want to like look at things like that, there's a lot of things that you could do that could be really interesting. Yeah. Um, and when it comes to just the Mongolian side, if you do not know Mongolian, how do you help? So I just want to emphasize that, we need to be careful when we don't know the language and we try to contribute to Wikipedias like that. I think people here would all have heard about the whole issue with the Scots Wikipedia, where yeah, basically someone, a very enthusiastic person that did not actually know the Scots language, was just uploading a bunch of stuff and kind of ruined a lot of language research there. A more recent example is stuff like Google Translate, where Google Translate added a bunch of languages, and then it turned out that some of them were just not fit for use at all, and the actual like language speakers, heritage speakers, were just appalled at what was happening. I think that was the Manx language, I believe that was happening too. But if you don't know the language, you can still help, right? So I believe these are the sort of things that could be more useful. So facilitation, Mongolian Wikipedia hasn't actually run projects by itself, even like banners and stuff. We've never done that. So helping with that would be great. Helping with the infrastructure side. So if you know tech, if you know people that know tech, it's very useful there because you can help with automating a bunch of things. You can use auto moderator, implement, um, or just use like the random tools that the Wikimedia Foundation already has, right? The scratch pads, etc. Just try to get people to know about that and help with the sort of back end side of Mongolian Wikipedia. All right. And finally, research. So in order to know what we need to do, we need to know what we already have. But I don't believe that we've actually had any sort of qualitative research done on the Mongolian Wikipedia. So just knowing, where the information gaps are, which categories have more information, which articles seem to get more edits, etc. Just like having a sort of doing like an analysis on all of that could be really interesting. I would suggest it as like an undergrad project for like data science or something. But yeah, it's something that we could definitely think about. So yeah, that's basically yeah it for in terms of just that. And I thought I just give very quickly like these four examples on what people could do right after this meeting, if you so wished, right? So the first bit is upload images from the Albert Kahn archives. So there was this, forget where, French or Belgian maybe, banker that financed a expedition like this worldwide thing where they just take pictures of the world in color, and this was back in like the early 1900s. So they have these great images. A lot of them are already on Commons, but they're not all there, and some of them have quality issues, etc. But I recently found out that you have libraries that have scanned them properly, etc., and they're all tagged as free, public domain, or Creative Commons zero. So you could have you know copy over images from there, or even like if you're so inclined, write a script to upload them en masse. That's one thing you could do and improve some pictures and whatever. There's also the without inter-wiki page on the Mongolian Wikipedia. It's fairly, I think, low barrier to entry because you just need to Google Translate like one phrase, and you can tell, okay, this one isn't connected to English. That's connected, and that helps a lot, right? As mentioned before, there's a wiki project, Mongols, and also wiki project, sort of Central Asia, and it has a requested articles section there. You could write articles there. There's a ton of articles that just don't exist and I believe should. One of the articles I've always wanted to either read or write is stuff like a Soviet Union Mongolia relations. It's currently all under like Mongolia, Russia, but it's not enough. And you could write a thesis on this. It's something that you could do. There's stuff about the city itself. So Ulaanbaatar is going through a rapid period of, let's say revitalization, let's say, where a lot of old buildings are being torn down. We could write articles for them, take pictures, etc. That'd be a nice thing to do. And then the fourth thing here is this is literally just an example. There's an article called Mongolian Calendar that is unfortunately only focused on Mongolia, and it doesn't include anything from Inner Mongolia. And the Inner Mongolian bit is fascinating. And I actually have this is one of my favorite sort of enthusiast sites, CJV Lang. So it's Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, and the author also blogs about Mongolian. But they have a ton of information, well sourced about culture, etc., that could be used on the English side. So these are just some examples of things that you could do. And when it just comes to the photo side, I just thought I'd end with this, where you don't need even to like start taking pictures now. You can use old pictures. So on the left-hand side, this is what used to be the tallest structure in, I guess still is, was the tallest structure still surviving from pre-modern Mongolia. This is like 10th or 11th century-ish. My parents took a trip back in 2010 to visit this. I was, teenager, etc. So I was like, no, I don't want to go. I want to stay home and, game or whatever. But they went, they took a bunch of pictures. And what happened was a few years later, the Mongolian government, as part of like a tourism thing, rebuilt it. So instead of having this 11th century thing, they just sort of constructed over it and it looks like the bottom image now. What, but the thing is, they still took pictures back then. So I was able to at least upload it and show what it used to look like. And you might end up doing a lot of these things for various reasons, right? Just having an old picture of something is immensely useful because most of the times they don't exist anymore. And on the right side is just an example I wanted to add where it doesn't even necessarily have to be you. So I don't live in Mongolia, but my mom and dad do. And my mom has this hobby, just, going around and looking at religious figures. So the Pope visited Mongolia for the first time in history, and my mom sent me a video of the Pope's motorcade. I just took a still and uploaded it, and now it's history. And I don't think anyone else bothered to do this, but it still helps, right? And you can see the Pope sort of being like, hello. So yeah, this is, I think, yeah, things you could do, things you could persuade family members, friends to do, etc. But yeah, this is the final slide. So that's basically it. And I thought, as a very final thing, I could talk about what needs to be done or what could be done now. So we need to improve the homepage to be a bit more welcoming and a bit more, let's say, dynamic, where things change. We haven't had like a featured article change in months, which isn't great. We need to identify the content gaps. So maybe do like, I don't know, do some research, do some data analysis on what we're missing, etc. Um, and also just like review the quality of things. We need to simplify a lot of the structures we already have. Like some of the categories that we have are just way too complicated and in-depth and just not maintainable. So we need to do that. We need to introduce automations. So to some degree, I'm already doing this. I basically have a Google Sheet where I can sort of do mass edits for like interwikis and categories like that. But I would love to just make that usable from Wikipedia itself using bots. So that's something that I'm interested in doing. And if anyone's interested, yeah, just ping me. Create and implement a quality review process, even for the featured articles, just for good articles, or even just like tagging articles as this is usable, this is good. That would be a good thing. And then finally, just public outreach and comms. We don't have that, and having that I think could be useful in the future. But yeah, that's basically it. Thank you very much for hearing me talk for like an hour and a half. Wow. So yeah, thank you. And if anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to keep talking.